It's my great pleasure to have you here after the summer. Well, it's still summer, but the summer we offer the Breakfast and Science seminars to the PhD students. So we are going to have two PhD students today presenting. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Professor Valentina Motto, who is the CIBM PET Hugueniche section head. And with this, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Pina, for this opportunity. And it's, in my turn, my great pleasure to present Cecilia Boccalini. She's a PhD student in our group. So our section works on PET, molecular imaging in degenerative conditions. Cecilia has started her PhD and she's doing her PhD with the Università Vita-Salute San Raffaele in Milan, where I also did my training in nuclear medicine. And actually her PhD is co-supervised by myself and by Professor Daniela Perani, who is also the supervisor of my MD thesis. So we have a personal history with Cecilia, and we extend this long-standing collaboration with her group. When Daniela Perani suggested that Cecilia could do her PhD with me and strongly recommended Cecilia, I knew that I could trust her completely because I knew how, let's say, what were her standards and how she likes to do research. And I was fully satisfied. I mean, Cecilia is doing brilliantly. She's in her third year now, already published many papers. You will see some of the research that she's currently conducting. She's already received also financial support for her stay here from the International Brain Research Organization, IBRO, and from the Parkinson Foundation. So today you will have some results specifically on the combined use of FDG PET and tau PET to characterize and understand what's happening to patients with cognitive disturbances. Cecilia.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction and good morning to everyone. I'm Cecilia, and today I'm going to present you the results of our specific work that investigated the PET biomarkers and specifically tau PET and FDG PET in explaining the cognitive impairment and the cognitive decline in a memory clinic cohort that is a cohort reached by Alzheimer's disease patients. And after a brief introduction, I will talk about these results. So, Alzheimer's disease neuropathological hallmarks are tau neurofibrillary tangles, amyloid beta plaques, and neurodegeneration. All of that can be assessed by PET using specific radiotracer that bind specific proteins or molecular mechanisms. And in the case of tau PET, here we can see like a prototypical pattern of Alzheimer's disease patients with an involvement of the medial temporal lobe, the lateral temporal, the parietal, and frontal cortices. And also we have an example of amyloid PET positive scan with higher uptake in the frontal and temporal parietal cortices. That is prototypical for Alzheimer's disease. For neurodegeneration, we can have FDG PET, that is a measure of glucose consumption and a marker of synaptic dysfunction. And here on the left, we can see like a pattern of hypometabolism that is prototypical for Alzheimer's disease involving temporoparietal regions. Moreover, neurodegeneration can be assessed also using MRI, that is a measure of brain atrophy. Regarding the temporal sequence of these mechanisms in Alzheimer's disease, according to the most compelling hypothesis, the first event should be like the cortical beta deposition in the neocortex. That is at the same time with the tau deposition in the medial temporal lobe. The combination of these two events led to the tau spreading from the medial temporal lobe to the neocortex. And we have neurodegeneration then in the same regions, more or less, where we have tau deposition. Neurodegeneration as well as tau deposition in the neocortex lead to the cognitive symptoms and the dementia in Alzheimer's disease patients. However, the association between all the individual ATN biomarkers and also their combination in explaining the cognitive decline and also the cognitive performance in a memory clinic cohort is still poorly understood. That's why we decided to do this work investigating this these biomarkers, focusing specifically on FDG PET for hypometabolism and tau PET for tau deposition. And in the literature, there were already evidence regarding the use of tau PET in comparison with amyloid and MRI, but not with FDG. And all of these previous studies were mainly focused on asymptomatic AD and the preclinical AD, and we focused our study in a memory clinic cohort. So the specific aims of our work were to assess the specific relationship between regional ATN abnormalities measured by PET and cognition that we measure using MMSE. Then we wanted to investigate the dynamic interplay between ATN and MMSE, applying the mediation analysis. And finally, we wanted to elucidate the prognostic value of ATN biomarkers for predicting the future cognitive decline in a memory clinic setting, and also because we have some follow-ups for MMSE. We included 94 subjects from the Geneva memory centers. So our sample included different patients at different stages of the disease, but most of them were patients with mild cognitive impairment. Most of them were amyloid positive, and half of them were tau positive. For 64 subjects, we have also the follow-up MMSE, and we checked like the comparability of the sample and the subsample of the follow-up, and we couldn't find like any difference between the two samples. And here we can see the features of the sample of the follow-up, that is still like the majority mild cognitive impairment, amyloid positive, and half of them tau positive. For the methods, for the measure, all ATN, so all the PET measure were visually assessed and also semi-quantitatively assessed. So regarding the visual rating, nuclear medicine experts rated all of these scans. And for the semi-quantification, we applied the literature-based standard measure. So for amyloid PET, we use the centiloid, and when we need to binarize like measure, we use like the literature-based cutoff. For the tau PET, we extract the standard, we calculated the standard uptake value ratio, so the SUVR in a lateral temporal ROI, that is a region that is known to be like prognostic. And also we extracted the SUVR in the global cortical regions, that is the one in blue here, so involving the temporal parietal occipital regions, that is a regions involving AD-related regions. And then for neurodegeneration, our focus was on FDG. So we extracted the SUVR in the same lateral temporal ROI that we use for tau. And we also extract the SUVR in a decomposite meta-ROI, that is the one that we can see over there, and is like a well-established ROI by Landau et al. For FDG. We wanted also to check MRIs to make comparable our results with those in the literature. And so we consider the hippocampal volume and also the cortical signature. And then for cognition, we had like the MMSE at baseline and the MMSE of follow-up for some of them. And this way we could calculate the MMSE annual rate of change, that is the difference between MMSE at follow-up and MMSE at baseline divided by the number of years of follow-up. For the statistical analysis, first, we applied general linear models. So we assess the correlation between all ATN measure and cognition at baseline, so MMSE, and C-long, that is MMSE annual rate of change. Then we applied causal mediation analysis to assess the interplay between ATN and the cognition and the cognition changes. And as a longitudinal analysis, we applied the linear mixed effect models to assess the cognitive trajectories over time, depending on each biomarker, so ATN separately, and then also apply on the TN profiles. Then we applied the Kaplan-Meier analysis and Cox proportional Hadza models to assess the Hadza ratio for cognitive decline. All the analyses were adjusted for age, sex, and education, and also the clinical status, since we had like patients in different stages of the disease. And in the main manuscript, we also did some sensitivity analysis, excluding patients with dementia, to be sure that they were not driving like the results. First of all, the results for the correlation, these are like the ROI-based results. And we found like the highest correlation coefficients in the correlation between N measured by FDG and MMSE at baseline, and then followed by tau assessed in the lateral temporal and the meta-ROI. Then we have like an neurodegeneration measured by MRI, and at the last position, amyloid. Then we did all these correlation voxel-wise, and these are like the patterns of correlation, and we can see like a widespread pattern both with FTG and tau PET. So in panel A and panel B, we can see all the regions that correlate with MMSE at baseline. So we have for both hypometabolism and tau deposition involving like temporoparietal regions. However, the tau patterns is like more widespread compared to the hypometabolic one, involving also the dorsolateral prefrontal cortices, as we can see in panel D. That is like the discrepancy ROI, so the difference is where there is tau correlating with MMSE, but not FDG. And in the overlap ROI, that is panel C, we can see these temporoparietal regions where both FDG and tau PET correlates with MMSE at baseline. Then we did this mediation model, and the ones that I'm showing now are the ones obtained from the data-driven, so the voxel-wise results. And basically, we found a mediation effect of hypometabolism in the relationship between tau and MMSE at baseline, both for tau in the region where we have both FDG and both hypometabolism and tau deposition, so the overlap ROI. But we found this effect also for tau in the discrepancy ROI, so the region where we have only tau deposition and not hypometabolism. We found also similar results when we consider the SUVR in the literature-based ROI. And then we checked this effect also with N measured by MRI. We found a similar results, however, a less proportion was mediated. If here we have like 30% and 39%, we found like 20% with MRI. Regarding the annual rate of change in MMSE, the order here is change. We found tau as the most, with the highest correlation coefficients, followed by amyloid, and then with neurodegeneration measured by FTG. And also the voxel-wise results are in line with these ROI-based results, since we found like a really limited pattern of hypometabolism limited to the orbitofrontal cortices and the precuneus, associated with MMSE annual rate of change. And the tau pattern is more widespread, involving the temporoparietal and the orbitofrontal cortices. And so, as we can see also in the discrepancy ROI, we have like a huge pattern with tau correlating with MMSE rate of change, but not with hypometabolism. However, we still found a mediation effect of hypometabolism on the relationship between with tau and MMSE changes, as the one that we found before. But with this analysis, with the annual rate of change, we couldn't find any effect of using MRI as a measure of neurodegeneration. Regarding the longitudinal results, first we applied linear mixed effect models with using individually each biomarker. And in this model, we could find like T plus, A plus, and N plus subjects decliner faster compared to the T minus, A minus, and N minus subjects, respectively. And here I show the TN profiles. And here we can see that all T plus profile, so in panel A, the green and the violet line declined faster compared to the reference group, so the T minus and minus group, the red one. And this suggests that tau is enough, independently from neurodegeneration, to predicting the cognitive decline. And also the survival curves say something similar, since we have a T+ profile that has had a shorter survival time compared to the other groups. We also run some Cox proportional Alzheimer models, and when we included all the biomarkers and the baseline MMSE in the same model, we found T as the highest significant risk factor for cognitive decline. And for the survival before, I meant remain stable and remaining free from cognitive decline, because we couldn't check like a change in diagnosis, but just a change in MMSE. So for some math, in our cohort, all ATN biomarkers, when used individually, were associated with cognitive impairment and decline. So each of them are like a robust indicator of Alzheimer's disease pathology. However, we found T, so tau, as the necessary determinant for cognitive decline, and these results was in line with previous results obtained in preclinical and early symptomatic Alzheimer's disease cohorts. And then we found that tau PET is a better prognostic tool than FDG PET, and this is like a new result because we couldn't find anything like that in the literature. However, these results also complemented the evidence of tau PET that outperformed MRI and amyloid PET. We found in some way a superior value of FDG compared to MRI as a measure of neurodegeneration, like more sensitive, given their correlation with cognitive performance and decline. And then, however, the prognostic value of PET exceeded both modalities, so both FDG and MRI, and our work wants to support the implementation of tau PET in the workup of patients, like in their daily routine. So again, like the take-home message are like the hypometabolism has the strongest association with concurrent cognitive impairment. Neocortical tau pathology is the main determinant for cognitive decline over time, and FDG PET has a superior value compared to MRI as a measure of neurodegeneration. And the highest prognostic value was found for tau PET, and it exceeded all other neuroimaging modalities. We were aware also of some limitation of the study. First of all, the use of MMSE, since it is like a global measure characterized by a ceiling effect, and then is less sensitive compared to other tests or test combination. Moreover, we have like a short follow-up period. We have an average of 2 years of follow-up. And for the SUVR, so for the PET quantification, when we need to binarize the measure, we use cutoff points that are literature-based. Only for tau, use a cutoff internally validated. So this is a point that could be implemented. And we add also some strength, like the heterogeneity of our sample, that is for a memory clinic. So our results are help for the applicability of these to the clinical setting. And moreover, this sample is rich for Alzheimer's disease patients. And by default, given the fact that this kind of patients usually address to a memory clinic. And so Alzheimer's disease subjects or in the spectrum are likely driving our results. Then we did not select our sample on the basis of other biomarkers, even not by amyloid pathology. Since our focus was on tau and neurodegeneration, there are already many studies in considering like deeply the amyloid pathology. Okay, with that I finish. I thank you for the invitation first, and then for your attention. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have just a couple of questions. So the first one is on the tau PET. Could you, so you said generally speaking is a better marker, so it's a better predictor for the cognitive decline compared to other markers. Is there any indication for which you can say that in particular tau deposition in certain areas and not in others, or better predictors, or you took general?
Okay.
Can you specify a bit more on the anatomy, or maybe I missed it?
Yeah. No, maybe I skipped this part. Okay. But usually we assess tau PET in this ROI, the blue one, that are like regions vulnerable for the tau deposition. Of course, tau deposits in the medial temporal lobe, which is really like in the early step, and it's still debated if it's like prognostic or not. But when it spreads goes to the lateral temporal regions and then the parietal and the occipital, you are pretty sure that, and you are developing like Alzheimer, you have Alzheimer in the brain. So those are the regions, and also the lateral temporal ROI that I didn't show here, but it's basically the lateral temporal regions are prognostic for Alzheimer's diseases. So we extracted the severity in these regions, and then we added all the voxel-wise as like a proof of that one in this region.
But could you, in principle, think of looking back at the data, get more ROIs, and see whether you can find an ROI that is even better, or like a more, unsupervised, without having these hypotheses, or is something so well established that?
I think it makes sense also because this is like the prototypical spreading pattern, but there are evidence that also some patients did not follow like the drug stagings, and so you can find also the patterns. There are like now some papers are published regarding like different subtypes of tau deposition patterns. So maybe models more individual, let's say, could be helpful. We use like a standard one, and the way the voxel-wise we try like to fill this gap, but maybe it's not enough. An individual ROI could be useful. I know that is like an effort to do that because I listened to a presentation at the AAC that they were looking at the like individual ROIs, but I should like try to search.
Is it market that more or less grows as the cognitive decline grows, so it doesn't really matter where you're looking, or whether there is maybe individual differences in the deposition. And so the second question is a little bit more maybe general. So you said in one of your last slides, like it seems that these results are really strong in terms of pointing out that this should be a measure used in a clinical routine. How do you envision convincing? So what is the strategy to convince clinicians to just use this instead of FDG PET? Or so what is the next step now? Since will like clinician just read the paper and say, okay, now we're going to switch to tau, or is it just curiosity? I have no idea how you're planning to do that.
I think like more studies are needed to do that. Now there are many studies on tau PET really proving the efficacy and the added value compared to the other measures. But
you need some sort of FDA approval, or these are in studies that needs to be double-blind, like a big large cohort of patients before they get into clinical indication, or you can do it locally.
No, I think we need an approval.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
This is really country based. So specifically tau PET, the tracer this is tracer based and country based. The tracer we used, Flow Tau Superior, is FDA approved in the US for this indication. But the other problem that combines with the accessibility to this technique is approval and reimbursement. Because as we're stating it, and it's not only our data, but the corpus of data is coming up. This is really a good technique, so it's working. And Cecilia is also doing work, as you see on that square, when we talk about applicability at larger scale, voxel-wise analysis, or looking for different regions is not very practical, but it's important to have either a robust method or even better, a visual rating strategy. And other analysis we've performed confirm that the good predictivity works both with quantitative approaches and with visual approaches, so it's robust. works. But the problem of access combines having it approved, and it's the case in the US, could be the case in Europe, and having it reimbursed. And it's a bit the chicken and egg problem, because having it reimbursed and approved is an effort from either individual producers or companies. And it's an effort that has costs that could be covered in the perspective of reimbursement. But the field of reimbursement of specific radio traces in cognitive disturbances is complicated because of the history there is already for amyloid PET traces, which are indeed approved and reimbursed in some countries. Switzerland is one of the lucky examples in this sense, but commercially complicated with the lack of therapeutic decision and impact so far, because of the lack of specific therapeutic approaches. This is all rapidly evolving. I don't know how much the public here is aware of the Alzheimer's treatment development, but really it's of end of last year and this year that convincing evidence has come up for medications for Alzheimer's disease. Medications that target these processes, amyloid and tau deposition. So when, and this is probably 2024, drugs will be approved, diagnostic tools associated with the selection of patients for drugs will have a much easier access. Exactly. Both for the classification, because there it will be really important to identify those who progress in a sensitive and reliable way. I mean, more. Yeah. Then this is.
But this is a political decision, or it's a company effort?
Probably, I mean, it's company efforts driven, the majority, because the development of radio tracers is partly academic, often academic at the beginning, but often licensed at some phase, and so it becomes close to development of a drug. And so it's also companies dependent, at least in some areas. So we'll see how that plays out. It's a bit more complicated in this sense than implementing a new sequence. Because, I mean, of course, new sequences in MR needs the approval, but then if the, let's say, if the hardware you're using can be more or less the same, then you don't have major investments to get it through. I don't know if anyone else of the participants online have any question. If you want to ask directly, please unmute yourself and do it. Show yourself.
No questions? Okay. Emily?
Yeah, I can ask a question. Were there in your patients group, were there any sign of vascular dementia? And in this case, is it possible that the cognitive function was altered because of features such as the white matter hyperintensities?
Could be because, I mean, we didn't select the patients, so we included all the patients that we have with the PET biomarkers. So we didn't check for hyperintensity or cerebrovascular diseases. So it could be that this is like contributors. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.